Hey, what's up, folks? I'm Robert Scavone Jr., the host of Summarily, a podcast for busy lawyers. I recently interviewed Ross Guberman, the creator of Brief Catch, on the podcast. We talked about ChatGPT and how lawyers can use it in their practice, and I was blown away by ChatGPT. Its functionality is remarkable, it's quick, and the outputs are pretty damn incredible. But there are some limitations, and Ross talks about those limitations during the interview. He also did a tutorial during the interview where he put ChatGPT to the test, asked it questions, and we reviewed the responses, and we were both really, really impressed. The entire interview is available on Summarily, my podcast, and I'll put a link below in the comment section. The Florida Bar approved the episode for 1 hour of technology CLE credit and 1 hour of general credit. The course number is provided in the podcast. The following video is the portion of the podcast where Ross is doing the tutorial. And I thought it'd be a good idea to put this on the YouTube page so you could watch Ross as he's doing the tutorial. Enjoy the video and please subscribe to the podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. On Summarily, we provide case law updates, we discuss recent legal news, we provide practice tips from experienced lawyers, and we interview judges and lawyers on a wide variety of topics. I hope you enjoy this video and the podcast. And remember, case law is one word.
What I've done is just taken a section of a brief, an actual brief, and I'm just going to try to show you the kinds of things you can ask it. Okay, so you see me typing here. I'm not as fast as it is, as you're about to see. I'll say, I'm going to call it a passage and not tell it that it's a brief.
So you're typing, can you summarize this passage and also create a new heading? Question.
Yeah, can you summarize this passage and also create a new heading? And I'm simply pasting what I copied. Okay, it's a brief in the employment world. And okay, just watch. I don't know, it's, you know, if you're not able to watch, it took, I don't know, less than half a second for it to read the whole, well, I say read the whole brief, and it's summarizing it now. And notice again, it's typing, it's a little bit like when you're texting, although of course you don't see the words as people text, but it has this sort of, I don't know, down home feel. You know, it looks a little bit like a courier font, you know, it's almost like a typewriter. And again, there's no formatting, there's no italics or bold so far, but I'll just, you know, explain whether you're watching or not watching that it really did take this fairly complicated section involving the evolving law of independent contractors in California, and it summarized it without even knowing that it's part of a brief, let alone what the issue is. It has the right case law. It does actually condense very well what the main arguments were. And then I also asked it for a new heading, and it gave one. I mean, I wouldn't use this heading in a brief myself. It sounds more like something for maybe, you know, an article or some kind of a post, but it's probably better than the original heading, frankly. But most important, it was able to, you know, creatively give us a brand new heading as at least an alternative. So I'm purposely doing this without having practiced it, so it won't look like I stacked the deck. So I don't know what we're going to get, but I'm just going to try something for you. So
essentially you copied and pasted in about how many paragraphs?
Kind of, you know, standard 5-paragraph section from a brief.
Okay, and it spit out a paragraph and a new heading.
Yeah, so I just asked, can you suggest 2 other possible headings? There it goes. Okay, so again, it seems to think this is an article, right? So applying the Borella standard comprehensive approach to identifying, you know, it sounds more like a memo. But it's giving you different headings, different options, you know, to play with. And you could go on and on. You could ask it to turn the summary into bullet points. You could ask it, you know, to have a longer summary, a shorter summary. But I want to show you something kind of like maybe higher level, although the ability to summarize text, as far as I have seen, is there are no words to describe how amazing it is. So yeah, it's not that exciting to summarize a section of a brief, but You can also give it a 300-page document and ask it to summarize the main points.
Well, what's really interesting about that, Ross, for practical purposes, if you're filing a brief, and most courts ask for a summary of the facts and a summary of the arguments. And, this seems to be a pretty good way to input your entire, let's say issue 1 into ChatGPT, and it'll spit out a paragraph or 2 summary.
That's so true. And, you could even go further. You could actually have it do an introduction, an argument summary, and headings, right? You could have it take your whatever your main points in introduction and have your Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3. You could also go ahead.
For that, you would put in, like, let's say, an entire section of a brief in issue 1, and then just ask it, can you give me the headings for these issues?
100%.
Wow.
Yeah. And the thing is, this is a strange thing to say, but a lot of people who use it will understand my point. It never gets tired. And I say that because sometimes you almost feel like, oh gosh, I've asked it to do so many things, I'm being greedy or something. Like, it doesn't care, right? You could say, right, could you now take the 7th heading and turn it into 4 bullet points, add it to the beginning of the 2nd paragraph, translate it into Spanish, and then create a diagram.
Wow.
We'll do it. I even find myself sometimes thanking it, like, oh, thanks, that was so helpful. And it will give you a nice response back, like, oh, I'm so happy that I was able to help you. But of course, it doesn't care, it doesn't get tired.
Okay, so now you've typed, how would you describe the logical structure of the passage, ? And could anything be improved, ?
Yeah, and I just wanted to show you can sort of give yourself or other people feedback. And while it's typing away, I'll try to narrate too. It actually is sort of diagramming the structure of the passage. It's saying it starts with introduction, then there's a contrast between 2 legal standards. One is from California code, I believe. The other is common law. It's characterizing this as a critique of, obviously the lawyers had an agenda in this case, so a critique of the way the code, the orders, the regulatory agency has interpreted the law. Paragraph 4 is said to be about potential consequences. But what's really interesting is what it's doing now, which is suggesting improvements. And I just want to reiterate, because I find this so shocking in a good way. It has no idea what your goal is. It doesn't know what the brief's about. It's just seeing a section. It doesn't know it's a brief.
Right.
It doesn't know what court you're in. It has no idea who you are. And honestly, I don't always think that all of these suggestions are worthy. I mean, for example, a lawyer doesn't generally just for no reason provide more real world examples. But if you think about it, this is kind of abstract. It's about independent contractors versus employees. Maybe they're onto something here, right? Maybe they're onto something that it's too abstract. It's hard to see how the standard that the lower court applied would allegedly hurt California employers. And it's also, by the way, correct in saying that the Borello standard is not explained very well. The one standard is explained better than the other. So you can see this as something that could help us. You could help yourself. You can ask for criticism. You can ask for suggestions. And frankly, we're talking about professors in school and the like. It could also be used to give other people feedback too.
Yeah, this is incredible. I mean, for the people that are listening or not watching, it says the passage follows a clear logical structure, and then it gives 5 examples of, I guess, what's good about the passage. And then it says the structure of the argument is logically sound and well articulated. If there were to be any improvements, they might include, and then it has 3 bullet points. For example, one is more real world examples. So it's telling you how you can improve on the passage, which to me is just, that's incredible. I mean, I could put in a section of my brief and say, tell me what's wrong with this. Or I could put in a section of an opposing party's brief and say, where are the holes in the logic in this argument?
That's even more fun, right? And
wow.
And if you do ask it a question like the one you just suggested, like where are the logical gaps? Same thing. It will generally identify steps you're skipping. and the like. I mean, again, I don't want to overhype it. It's not always accurate. Again, it doesn't know your goals, but it's certainly a good place to start, is I think,
now, what if you, Ross, what if you put something like, you copy a passage from your brief or opposing party's brief or motion, and you say, are the cases cited in this passage accurately represented, or are they saying what the court actually said? Will it be able to detect that?
No, and I've tried it. And the reason it's not able to do that goes back to what we were discussing earlier, because it doesn't have, right now, it doesn't have an exhaustive set of American case law. It has no way of doing that. But what I thought you were going to ask is, can you ask it to provide a rebuttal? And you actually can. So you could take the other side's section and say, okay, how would you argue against these positions? It won't give you the right cases.
Right.
It will at least give you something to work with. If nothing else, it's mildly entertaining to see what a computer thinks is your best shot.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there a limit? I know there's a limit to how many questions you can ask, but is there a limit to how many, like, could you copy and paste an entire brief into this thing?
So this is a really important question you're asking, because this would be a huge limitation, right? If you're a lawyer,
right.
For many purposes, you would need to have more than, incidentally, the window itself has, I believe, an 8,000 word limit, which is nothing, right? But it's nothing close to what you're describing, like a full document. So one really cool thing I learned just a couple of weeks ago is there are these free services. I think one is called ChatGPT Splitter. So let's say you put in a 200-page document. What it does is it breaks it up into 8,000 word chunks, and it puts each one in its own window. It includes language to tell ChatGPT that you're not done uploading the document, and all you have to do is copy and paste it. And then you could ask it whatever you want. So it knows that you're uploading things in pieces. I believe that there are ways to do it even more readily, with APIs and the like. But just a regular person, who doesn't want to get too complicated, that's a very good example. Just ChatGPT Splitter.
Wow. I mean, now I want to upload an entire Supreme Court opinion and ask it to pick it apart.
Well, I've done it. I've done that.
How did it come out?
I've also asked it to characterize the style of one of the justices writing. Yeah, and for that kind of a question, you do, to make the answer reliable, you do need more than 8,000 words, right? You often would need to feed it many pages. Now, I know you asked about, can it correct things? So one really interesting thing you can do is actually give it instructions on how to rewrite something. So I'm asking it, can you rewrite the passage with stronger topic sentences and better transitions between paragraphs? Now, I don't know exactly what's going to happen with this excerpt, but I do want to point out that a lot of people are paid a lot of money to do what I'm asking it to do, like take a section from a brief and make the actual paragraphs more persuasive, more compelling.
Yeah.
So let's just see what happens here. It's funny, kind of chatty, right? Certainly, here's a revised version of the passage. So it's actually, I would imagine, because I have done this before and studied it, in detail. What it really does have an ability to read an entire paragraph on anything and extract out the main point and compare it to the original topic sentence. Sometimes people get, they look and they say, well, that's not what my point was. And my answer is, well, maybe it's telling you something that you don't know. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes, again, it's limited. It doesn't know what your overall goal is. But you notice it's giving you kind of free headings and new paragraphs and some sort of transitional device between paragraphs. And it's pretty darn helpful, if nothing else. Sometimes I think it overcomplicates the wording. I would say at times it actually takes things in the wrong direction style-wise, which I don't quite understand. But on this kind of content side, the structural side, it's really, really quite good. And
so yeah, what it's done is essentially taken the summary and broken it up into 5 or 6 different small paragraphs, each with its own heading, and then it's provided a conclusion with a paragraph.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, you could look at, it's almost reverse engineering your writing. You could look at it and, no doubt it's going to give you at least a couple of ideas for editing. One big concern, I think, across the profession, beginning with concerns about law students on up, would be that people are going to over rely on this and defer and get lazy and, not really think things through. And I think you can see that that's a reasonable concern, right?
Sure.
If you are tired or in a rush, or if you're a student and you want to go out and, have drinks, you could absolutely see people just copying and pasting this, and thinking that they're doing something okay, right? Because it seems so authoritative and reliable, and that that's a problem. It's a problem, but in a way, it's also good news, because it means that we're still needed, right? Humans are still necessary.
What have you heard about firms or lawyers' concerns with regard to just that, to essentially coming up with a product that they didn't really develop?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'd say is, like, let's put this in context, right? I mean, Westlaw and Lexis, people enter keywords, and they have head notes, and they're copying things from cases, and they're looking at things their employer's already written. So we shouldn't be too self-righteous here and say, oh my goodness, this isn't really your own work. Yeah, sure. More than the examples I gave, that's true, but it's not like we're going from one extreme to the other, right? Part of being a lawyer is being efficient and not reinventing the wheel.
A few things that I wanted to see if we could mess with here. What if you were to ask, well, first of all, I'm assuming if you put in, a passage from an opinion and asked it to find its logical flaws, that would work.
Yep.
What about things like,
you can also flag tone. If you ask it something like, is any of this over the top?
Really?
I can tell you, since I'm something of an expert on judges' levels of rhetoric, I will say it is damn good. It will find the one phrase that would make me roll my eyes.
Right.
Say, this could seem sarcastic, or this could seem offensive to the party that lost.
It'll tell you that.
Absolutely.
Oh,
and you can also
cool.
say, you can also do things that are really kind of fun, like ask it to translate a passage into a sonnet, or, make it sound like Donald Trump or Joe Biden, or, an actor, famous actor.
Wow.
But on a more serious note, if you're trying to, do something that really will help you job wise, you can experiment with things like make the passage sound a little bit more formal, a little less formal, a little bit more confident. And it's pretty good at that. And that's also true, by the way, if you put in emails. If you put in an email and say, hey, I'm going to send this to opposing counsel, is it obnoxious? You get a pretty good answer, and often suggestions for rewording.
What if you put in something like, what's Judge or Justice so-and-so's theory on X?
Let's try it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're typing in, what was Justice Scalia's approach to judicial decision-making?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a great prompt. But by the way, you might have heard there's a new job category in America called prompt engineer. We can make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year helping people type the right things into ChatGPT. So maybe I need one. I don't know. Let's try it. Let's do it.
All right.
Okay. So what was Justice Scalia's approach to judicial decision making?
Okay, so it's telling us a little bit about.
Yeah, it's giving us some, a little bit of, kind of like when you're a kid and you're trying to fill up space. It's also letting us know when he served on the court.
Right.
Didn't ask 1986 to 2016. So, well, I think pretty darn good. Okay, so he actually, we learned ChatGPT actually distinguishes between originalism and textualism. I just heard Justice Alito at a conference make the same distinction, by the way, so I can sort of compare the two, because he said people often merge the two and forget that originalism and textualism are not the same. So very interesting that ChatGPT separates the two, but then also in the next paragraph, it looks like says, well, in both approaches, Scalia was, advocated for limiting judicial discretion. A little bit of a conclusion, a general conclusion. But what's also interesting, you can see if you're watching, is you might have heard some people think ChatGPT is too liberal, others think it's too conservative. So it's interesting that there's a little bit of kind of commentary now, right? That these philosophies were central to his decision making. Sometimes, they led him to conclusions that went against his beliefs. Other people I know would say that's actually not true, that it's exaggerated, that he really went the other way. It's kind of staying out of that. But at some point, you can see, however the AI is working, it is making what many people would call a judgment call.
Yes.
No intended, right? And maybe that's necessary, but it's also the case, as you see in regular life, that, on the one hand, in the answer, it's telling us he served from 86 to 2016 when he passed away. But this is also being presented as a fact, right? This is presented as a fact about whether he was consistent or inconsistent and the like. And that's one of the ways ChatGPT is controversial.
What about, and I think you might have mentioned at the top that a lot of people use it for factual information. What if you said, what were the laws like surrounding gun ownership from 1900 to 1920? So we're typing in, this is fun. What were
laws on gun ownership like from which decades did you give me?
1900 to 1920. So we're typing that in.
I'll just say United States.
In the United States. Perfect.
I think I bet 99% of people who ask questions like this are talking about the United States, but I thought I'd throw it in there.
So during the period of 1900 to 1920, gun laws in the United States
are less
restrictive than they are today. Wow.
Yeah, this right. This, and if you think about the sort of revolution of Google search and how when Google search exploded, people said it was going to change the world. Well, there are many steps. Let's say you're a high school kid and you got to write about gun laws in the United States, and you want to go to Google. You still have to mediate. You got to read. You got to know which links to go for. So it's the idea that it's putting all this together in a seemingly definitive form that excites people and scares them.
Right. Now, I guess the tough part about this is, even though it's spitting out this information, including, it says it from 1920 to from 1900 to 1920, also saw an emergence of gun control laws for public safety issues.
Yep.
That obviously, if you're a lawyer, you're still going to have to go back and fact check all this stuff.
That's right. And then notice also that there are never any citations to authority. I don't mean blue booking citations. I mean any type of citation, right? So it doesn't tell you where it gets the idea that, for example, that in the early 20th century, the gun control became a public safety issue and didn't result in major legislation until the 1930s. So yeah, there's never. Now you can ask it, by the way. We could try, right? Why don't we try it? Because that's the kind of thing a lawyer cares about, right?
What's the source for the statement that gun control emerged as a public safety issue from around 1900 to 1920?
Before I click enter, I'll just tell everybody an interesting thing I've noticed myself is if it looks like you're questioning it, and that's kind of what it looks like. Yeah. Sometimes it will immediately assume that it's wrong and it will apologize, which I find very interesting. And then even when it's not wrong. So we'll see what it does. See, I apologize for any confusion. Yeah, I don't have direct access. I generate responses. And this is, of course, boilerplate that I've seen before. But then, so it's got the disclaimer, it must have good general counsel over there, OpenAI.
Yeah.
But then it does, though, after the disclaimer, explain. And then it sort of backs away a little bit and says, oh, it's a broad characterization. Yeah. And
well, that's really important, Ross, because I mean, that's, I guess what the takeaway from this is that you really do need to challenge it if you're concerned.
And another interesting thing, well, two things I can tell you. So because of the way it works, where it's calculating the percent that the next word should be, dog or cat, every time you ask it a question, you'll get a slightly different answer, which can be really exciting or really nerve-wracking, depending on your goal. The other thing I've noticed, and I'm hardly the only one who's noticed this because I've read about it too, is that the very best insights you'll get will often be sort of, as they are in life in general, follow-up questions. So for example, when we asked it to create those topic sentences, you can actually ask it to review itself. You can say, well, now can you go back through those topic sentences that you created and can you make them even better? Or do you see any ways that you deviated too much from the original?
So, and do you use the term you? Do you refer it to as you?
I mean, I personally do, even though it might seem a little strange.
And it works.
It really, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine a lot of this is by design, but you might have noticed it gives you these kind of friendly things like, certainly, I'm happy to help. I'm sure, the geniuses behind this want it to become a little bit like a friend so that you use it all the time once they start charging $1 billion.
Right. So if you were to ask it a question like, what are the elements of battery in Illinois?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's not going to give you citations. So what are the elements of battery in Illinois and what? Oh, okay, interesting. And what's the source?
Made that up. I'm kind of copying your lead. So battery is defined by the Illinois Criminal Code. I mean, I don't know the answer if it's a pure, statutory versus common law. Notice it does tell you, oh, my knowledge cutoff is 2021. It gives you the code. There's battery, A1 and 2. And then there, as time goes on, I've noticed more and more of these disclaimers.
Yeah.
Laws can change. You never know. The law is complicated.
But here it is giving you a source of authority, the code itself.
100%, right? Yeah. And, I imagine if we asked it, has it ever been amended? Who is it cited in scholarly articles? You get information too.
And you could ask it,
what about case law? What about case law? What's the most?
Or you could ask it, what does a specific case? What's the holding in a specific case? That's probably an easy one.
Let's try this. What's the most commonly cited case in Illinois on battery?
On battery. We've asked it what's the most commonly cited case.
Yeah, so it's
giving us a disclaimer. Yeah. Legal citations can depend on specific legal issues. Okay, so more disclaimer language.
It's telling you how to, oh, that's pretty funny. It's actually directing you to Westlaw or Lexis.
Yeah.
I got to do a shout out to my friends at Case Text and Fast Case. Yeah. I mean, we're joking, but this is another fear, right? It's going to become like Google, where you can pay to have a higher rank and so forth. So, I got to say, I think most lawyers listening would rather it do this than just or guess.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, I'm not sure why it's not able to give us anything on this, but it is able to give us the statute. But yeah, and other times I've asked it for cases. I mean, I recently asked it, what are the most commonly cited cases in the Fifth Circuit for transferring venue, and it gave exactly the right cases.
Wow.
All 5.
Okay, but here it's essentially giving us a bunch of disclaimers, and then it says at the bottom, for the most current and accurate information, please consult the legal professional.
That's right. And I mean, for all I know, in the 2 weeks that have passed since I did that, it's certainly having more and more disclaimer language as time goes on, and maybe that's changed. The other thing I'm guessing is it's much easier to figure out what cases are cited in motions to transfer venue in the Fifth Circuit than it would be to figure out which cases, battery. There aren't that many cases perhaps on battery anymore. Right. Yeah.
What about, can we do one final one, Ross?
Of course.
What about a practical tip? For example, what are 5 things you need to do to prepare for oral argument?
I'll type that in, but I'll just throw something else out there that it's incredible at. Let's say you say, I'm starting my own firm, and I need to watch costs. What are the 5 best things I can do to get new clients, keeping in mind, time and money, that kind of thing? It's amazing at. But
wow.
So now, see, I made up my example. What did you want me to ask it?
What are the 5 most important things when preparing for oral argument before a court? Most important tips
before the Supreme Court, or just in general?
But just in general, before before an appellate court. Perfect. So let's see what it tells us here. Wow. First one is know the record and law inside and out. Very true. 2, anticipate and prepare for questions. Okay. Including hypotheticals. You should
prepare for hypothetical questions. Not get defensive.
Yeah. Be clear and organized. Another good tip.
Now,
maintain respectful interactions. Number 4. And decorum. It talks about decorum being critical. Oh, nice. Number 5 is be flexible. While it's important to have a clear plan for your argument, you must also be flexible enough to deviate from that plan to respond to the judge's questions. Wow, so this is really good.
I'm going to show you just really fast. I'm sure we have to end then. A good example where you don't need to worry about hurting someone's feelings. So I put in there, are there any less obvious tips? And I've used this a lot, like beyond, like even if you ask for, marketing advice, like give me things that people generally don't think of. So let's just see what it says. Are there any less obvious tips? See, it's not offended. It doesn't have any feelings, and it gives you now more. So understand the judge's perspectives. Notice it didn't say anything about, research judges, research the court in the first 5 tips. But so it's giving you some, I wouldn't necessarily say these are probably, I wouldn't say these are 5 tips that are really, necessarily less obvious than the first 5, but at least you can kind of see that you can interact with it and ask it to do more, give you more, tailor it to what you're looking for. And it's.
Yeah, but these are really good, Ross, like number 2, number 3, don't ignore the points.
I've heard multiple Supreme Court justices talk about this for many minutes, right? Yeah. Which means people don't follow the tip, whether they think they do or not.
Yeah. Don't ignore your weak points. Listen actively to questions. Watch your body language. Those are really good tips.
Yeah, we all know that from watching TV. You see the lawyers rolling their eyes.
Yes.
Yeah. And also that, if the judge interrupts, don't feel like you got to rush through the rest.
Yep. This is great. Well, all right. Well, thank you for that tutorial.